For the past 15 years, I'd pressed my badge against that scanner like clockwork. Beep, red light access denied. I paused, wondering if maybe my hand was shaking too much, or if the scanner was malfunctioning. I tried again, slower this time, gripping the lanyard tightly with both hands. Beep, red once more behind me. A few employees walked by, their badges lighting up green like nothing had changed, as if I wasn't standing there with my arms still weak from the stroke, staring at the locked glass door. The silence in that moment felt louder than the hum of machines on the warehouse floor. I turned slightly and looked at Marcus, the security guard behind the front desk. We knew each other by name. He used to greet me every Monday morning with a joke about my coffee order. Today, no jokes. He looked at me, then away, then back again. His lips tightened after a few seconds. He stood up slowly and approached. "I think there's a problem with my badge," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "Can you check the system?" Marcus hesitated before leaning in, whispering, "They said you were terminated last week, Rachel." But no official memo was sent out. No one wanted to make the call. I didn't move or respond. My left fingers twitched, the only movement I could manage since the stroke terminated. I had spent weeks in a hospital bed, fighting to speak clearly and walk unaided. I was still recovering. I hadn't even been given a chance to come back, to explain, to ask for time. Was this how they informed people now? Through silence. "I'm sorry," Marcus said gently. "They removed your clearance last Thursday. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure." I nodded slowly. Once it was the only thing I could do without falling apart behind the glass. Someone from HR walked by. She saw me but didn't stop. Her eyes flicked to her phone, and she turned down a hallway that said everything. No explanation, no conversation, not even a goodbye. Just a red light and locked doors on the other side. I stood still for a long time, my breath visible in the cool morning air, my hand still clutching the badge, and a question echoing louder than the stroke itself. How do you erase 15 years without a single word? That day began like every other Tuesday. My Outlook calendar was packed with back-to-back meetings from 8:30 a.m. well past dinner. I hadn't eaten anything but half a protein bar and 3 cups of stale coffee. My team had flagged issues in a vendor compliance report, and I was the only one left who understood the outdated procurement framework. So I stayed late again. By 6:35 p.m., I was on the final Zoom call of the day. Preston Lang, the CEO, dialed in just long enough to bark about missed margins and demand a new projection model by morning. I remember telling him the timeline was unsafe for the team. "Preston, they've been working non-stop." Silence. Then his voice, flat and dismissive. "Don't make this emotional, Rachel. Just get it done." The call ended abruptly. No goodbye. I stared at the screen, still open with charts I had memorized. My hand hovered over the mouse, my spine rigid, my head heavy, and then it hit. At first, I thought it was a migraine, a sharp stabbing light behind my left eye. But when I tried to stand, my left foot gave out, my arm slipped off the desk, limp, and words formed in my mind but wouldn't come out. I was fully aware as my body betrayed me. I collapsed to the floor, unable to reach my phone or even scream. The office was quiet. Most people had gone home. My vision blurred, then tunneled. I remember the HVAC humming overhead, flickering fluorescent lights, my heart pounding wildly. And then nothing. I woke up to the slow beep of machines, a nurse checking my vitals, soft light spilling from a window. I was in a hospital bed, IV in my arm, wearing a gown. Disoriented, I turned my head, which throbbed as if it had been split open and sewn back together. My voice cracked when I asked, "What time is it?" The nurse replied gently, "You had a stroke, sweetheart. A mild one, but it was close. You've been here 2 days." My mouth went dry. My hand twitched. 2 days I reached for my phone, dead. The nurse handed it back after charging it. Notifications flooded the screen. Missed calls, Slack pings, system alerts, calendar invites, and an email unopened at the top subject. Employment status notification, sent 6:43 p.m. the night I collapsed, from HR@aorc.com. I opened it. "Dear Rachel, as of today, Avamore will initiate a review of your continued employment due to unexplained absenteeism and non-response during active workflow cycles. Please consider this formal notification of performance-based concern. Regards, HR Department. No name, no warmth, no acknowledgement of my condition. Just a cold, bureaucratic reprimand sent a minute after my body failed me. My breath caught. My pulse surged. I turned the screen away and stared at the ceiling tiles. They knew I'd collapsed. They had to. They could see my last system activity. My coworkers surely reported my absence, yet the email was still sent in that moment. Something inside me broke. Not like the stroke that hit my body, but something deeper. I wasn't just exhausted anymore, I was disposable. And for the first time, the pain wasn't only physical, it was betrayal quiet, calculated. They were getting ready to erase me before I even had a chance to stand again. The next few days passed in a dull haze of medication, blood pressure checks, and daily physical therapy assessments. Nurses helped me walk a little farther down the hall. My voice, slurred on day one, had sharpened, but still came slower than before. What hadn't improved was the weight pressing on my chest, not from the stroke, but from the silence. On the fourth morning, I finally had enough strength to sit up, open my laptop, and try to contact someone at HR. I told myself it had to be a misunderstanding, an automated email, something slipped through the cracks. So I started simple. I called HR. The first number rang 5 times before diverting to voicemail. I left a calm, professional message. No anger, no panic. Just me, Rachel Simmons, Director of Global Compliance, explaining I'd been hospitalized, was recovering, and ready to discuss next steps. No call back. I tried again 2 hours later. Then once more at the end of the day, I sent 2 emails. One marked, urgent still. Nothing by the second day. I widened my efforts. I reached out to my direct manager. Silence. I messaged an old colleague on Slack. The message showed delivered, but never read. It wasn't just oversight. I was being ghosted. I stared at my inbox, the cursor blinking beside another follow-up draft, sunlight streaming harshly through the hospital window, making the screen hard to see. I tilted it just enough to catch my reflection, the dark shadows beneath my eyes, the slight slump of my left shoulder, and the exhaustion etched deep into my face. Then it struck me hard. They weren't waiting to hear from me anymore. Their minds were made up. That email, sent mere minutes after I collapsed, wasn't a warning. It was the final act, the curtain falling on my time there. My breath caught, but I swallowed it down. This wasn't the moment to break down. Not here, not with wires still taped to my chest. Still, a small part of me clung to hope that someone, anyone I had mentored, trained, or supported, would reach out. That fragile hope shattered late Thursday afternoon when my phone buzzed with a message from a number I recognized. Angela. She'd been on my team 6 years. A single mom and one of the sharpest policy writers I'd ever hired. Angela's message read, "Hey Rachel, I heard. I'm so sorry. I wish I could say more, but I can't. I still need this job. I have my son. Please understand." I read it twice. Then again, I didn't blame her, but it still stung. Angela wasn't betraying me. She was just surviving, like the rest of them. Like I once had. We had all stayed silent when someone else vanished, blaming it on corporate reshuffles, budget cuts, something outside our department. Now, it was my turn. I set the phone down and leaned back against the pillows. My legs trembled from the physical therapy walk earlier that morning, my throat parched. No meetings, no reviews, no explanations, just silence. They were trying to erase me without confrontation. No lawsuits, no paper trail, just a void where Rachel had been. In that void, all I had was a broken body and a growing certainty. This wasn't incompetence, it was intentional. The next morning, I didn't bother calling HR. Instead, I reached out to a lawyer, not to sue yet, but to ask one question. What happens if a company erases you while you're still recovering from a stroke? Her answer was simple. It depends on whether you have proof. Do you? I didn't reply, but soon I would, because if they wanted to pretend I never existed, I was determined to make sure my silence became the loudest thing they'd ever hear at 9:26 a.m. Carla entered my room again, her soft sneakers making no sound, kindness lingering in her eyes. She wasn't my nurse that day, but she stayed a little longer than usual, hesitant, like she had something to say, but wasn't sure she should. I was propped up on pillows, flipping through a physical therapy pamphlet I had no energy to read. The dull ache in my shoulder had softened, but the heavy fog weighing on my chest hadn't lifted. Not since Angela's message, not since all those unanswered calls. Carla silently checked my blood pressure, glanced toward the closed door, then finally spoke. "You worked at Avener, right?" she asked almost casually. I nodded cautiously. 15 years. Her eyes flickered. My brother used to work there. In finance, he left last year, not by choice. That caught my attention. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small black flash drive, holding it between her fingers like it might burn her. "He made a copy of some internal files before he left," she whispered. I didn't ask what was on it. But when she saw my name on the hospital board, she gently placed the flash drive on the tray beside my bed. "He said if anything ever happened to him, or someone like him, I should give this to them. I think it was meant for someone pushed out unfairly." I stared at the simple, unlabeled drive, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for it. "Why me?" I asked. My throat dry. Carla didn't smile or explain. She just said, "Because what they did to you isn't right." Then she turned and left, the door whispering shut behind her. 3 days later, back in my apartment, the first night in my own bed since the stroke, I finally opened the drive. Inside were dozens of folders. Internal memos, departmental reports, flagged compliance notes, audit meeting recordings, all neatly organized by quarter and department. I clicked on one labeled 2023 Q4 Workforce Risk Assessment. PDF. My heart pounded harder with each line as I scanned it. The report classified every senior employee by risk level, cost versus output, projected health liabilities, insurance premium trends, and there, plainly written, Employee ID 03241, name, Rachel Simmons position, Director of Global Compliance Insurance Cost Tier, 4Q4 status, productivity uncertainty flagged. Evaluate exit strategy if workload impact continues. The words were sharp, clinical, cold. Evaluate exit strategy. That was corporate code for she's becoming too costly. Get rid of her. It wasn't just me, dozens more names followed. Most over 50, flagged tier 3 or 4 some, had little red exclamation points beside them. I didn't know exactly what those meant, but I had a pretty good guess. I sat there, the quiet in my apartment unnatural, too still outside. New York kept moving, as always. But inside me, something cracked wide open. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't paranoid. They'd been planning this long before my stroke. And now, holding that drive, I had something they hadn't expected. Proof. Not just of carelessness, but of a deliberate system treating people like line items on a spreadsheet, weighed against premiums and margins, and quietly deleted. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling just enough to remind me I was still human. For the first time in weeks, something shifted beneath the grief. Not anger yet, not power, but something close. Hope fragile, but real. And I knew one thing. If I was marked as a risk to manage, I was about to become the problem they couldn't control. I didn't sleep that night. The flash drive sat beside me on the kitchen table, still plugged into my laptop. Its contents backed up twice, once to the cloud, once to an encrypted external hard drive I hadn't touched in years. I moved slowly, still nursing my stiff shoulder and tight chest, but my mind raced by 3 a.m. I was deep into the folders Carla's brother had left behind. The volume of files was staggering. He hadn't just grabbed snapshots. He'd downloaded Avamore's entire living memory. And the deeper I dug, the more rage settled into my bones. Emails between mid-level HR managers, joking about pushing burnout to speed department turnovers, spreadsheets tracking employee hours against insurance burdens, Slack messages flagging staff who requested medical leave as operational drag. What sickened me most wasn't the language used. It was the tone, cold, clinical, and utterly normalized. One email dated 4 months before my stroke had the subject line, Tier 4s to watch Q3 review. I opened it. The message was brief and direct. Begin exit preparation for the following, if productivity trends continue. Consider internal justification strategies. Non-disciplinary preferred. My name wasn't on that list yet, but two others were. Cynthia Valdez, 59, Senior Logistics Analyst, and Samuel, 62, Risk Management Lead. I remembered them both. Working in the same building, Cynthia had suddenly gone silent one day, simply stopped coming in. HR later told us she'd taken early retirement. Samuel's desk had been empty weeks before we heard he'd accepted a consultant role elsewhere. At the time, I believed it. I didn't question a thing. Then I opened a secondary file labeled Incident Reports Confidential. Inside was a collection of scan summaries, mostly unrelated to compliance, but flagged as medical Cynthia Valdez reported fainting during a vendor audit call, was advised to go home, filed a PTO request, and was denied. Samuel reported high blood pressure and fatigue, requested ergonomic accommodations, and was denied. Then another name. Gerald Watts, 60, accounts receivable. He'd collapsed in the parking garage, paramedics called, no documented follow-up, no emails about his return, no newsletter updates, no farewell lunch. Just like me, he vanished. I leaned back, heart pounding. 3 strokes, 3 employees, 3 quiet disappearances. They hadn't only erased me, I was part of a pattern, a system, a method. Suddenly, workforce risk sounded less like HR jargon and more like a quiet death sentence. The anger didn't hit all at once. It grew slowly, tightening around my chest with every line I read. I recalled nights working until 10, missed birthdays, double shifts, Sunday calls. I remembered coaching junior analysts late, rewriting audit responses last minute to make our board look better than it deserved. And now I knew. They weren't grateful. They were preparing my replacement while I was still firefighting at 4:40 a.m. I shut my laptop and sat silently. No tears, no screams, just a heavy, sharp weight settling inside me. This wasn't about me anymore. It was a company systematically discarding its most experienced people the moment they became inconvenient, masking it as transitions and cloaking it in professional language, not incompetence, not bad luck. Deliberate, and thanks to a nurse with a brother who saw too much and cared enough, I had the evidence I would give them what they never gave me. A documented response, consequences, no press releases, no quiet exit I was going to speak. And this time, they'd have nowhere to hide by 7:15 a.m. I was dressed, hair pulled back tight, seated before my laptop with 2 cups of coffee, one to drink, the other to remind me I was still functioning, as I once did. Morning sun bled through half-drawn blinds, catching dust in the air. I hadn't slept, but I didn't need sleep. I needed answers. The files Carla gave me weren't just suspicious, they were damning. What I didn't know yet was whether I could use them, or if the company would bury me all over again. This time in legal silence. So I searched. I typed one phrase into the browser. Employment discrimination / recovery labor attorney, New York. The results came quickly, but one stood out. Olivia Hart, attorney specializing in labor law and employee rights. We don't just defend workers, we rebuild them, her site said. It sounded like a pitch, but I had no better ideas. I booked a consultation by 9:40 a.m. We were on a video call. Olivia looked young, early 30s maybe, but focused, sharp-eyed, no small talk. Tell me what happened, she said simply. I told her everything. The late nights, the stroke, the silence, the badge that wouldn't work, and the flash drive. I showed her the risk report, scrolled through the list including my name, even played a recorded planning call from a folder labeled Q4 Staffing Adjustments. The voice on the other end, cold and calculating, I was sure it was Preston Lang, the CEO, advising his team to preemptively transition high-cost employees before year's end. Olivia listened quietly, jotting notes now and then. When I finished, I asked, "Do I have a case?" She leaned forward. "You don't just have a case," she said. "You have a blueprint." A blueprint? I blinked. This isn't just wrongful termination, Rachel. This is systemic discrimination based on health status and possibly age, the emails, the risk tier system, the denial of leave requests. It all fits a pattern, a class action pattern. The tightness in my chest shifted, not relief, but something close. But here's the catch, Olivia warned. You have to be smart, strategic. If we go public too soon, they'll lock down files, shred documents, erase emails. We need to move quietly, build our case, then strike. I nodded, jaw clenched. I've waited this long. She smirked. Good. Then let's start first. I need to know who else on that list still works there. I paused, reopening the file. Names scrolled past. One of them still messages me sometimes. Jenna, she's still inside. Later that day, I reached out to Jenna. I said little, just that I was investigating something important, and her name had come up. I didn't ask for anything, yet her reply came 20 minutes later. I figured it was only a matter of time. They're already watching me, but I've saved what I could. Tell me what you need. I stared at the screen. Something shifted for the first time since I collapsed on that office floor, since I stared into hospital lights, unsure if I'd ever walk straight again. I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel erased. I had allies. I had proof. And now, I had Olivia. Was I scared? Yes. Still fragile, still unsteady in a body that betrayed me. But the anger once buried deep beneath my ribs had turned into fuel. Controlled, focused, I wasn't healed. Not yet. But I had a path for the first time. I was drawing the map. I hadn't expected that email. Not from her. Not from anyone inside. I just finished another call with Olivia, talking about needing more concrete evidence linking the risk tier system to executive actions. Something undeniable. Something they couldn't spin as policy jargon. She mentioned we'd need at least one insider, someone who'd seen the gears turning. I had mentioned Jenna's name casually before, but I was too afraid to reach out again. Too risky, too soon. Then, out of nowhere, a message appeared in my inbox from a private Proton mail address. No signature, no subject, just a single line. I've seen what they're doing. You're not crazy. I stared at the screen, my breath caught somewhere between a gasp and a question. My first thought was suspicion, maybe a trap, but something about that phrase felt familiar. Jenna used to say those exact words when we burned the midnight oil on audit proposals. I replied with just one word. Safe. 30 minutes later, a response came back. Safe-ish. Using my own device, encrypted connection, can't write long. Can't keep this on me for long either. Attached was an image file, a screenshot. I opened it and zoomed in. It was from Amacor's internal HRS, their time tracking and productivity dashboard. I recognized the layout immediately, but something was wrong. Each employee's record showed 3 values: clock in, clock out, productivity score, compliance flag. Then, highlighted in red at the bottom, a note beside one row. Retroactive adjustment applied to PTO record. Do not trigger absence protocol, flagged for quiet transition. I zoomed out to see the name. It wasn't mine. It belonged to someone still working there, but that phrase, quiet transition, was the same wording from my own workforce risk file. This wasn't just speculation anymore. It was real. They were tampering with records, manipulating the system, preparing people's exits before the targets even knew. My heart raced. Another message popped up. That's from 2 weeks ago. Pulled it before they wiped the log. Then came a second file, a screen recording less than 10 seconds long. A cursor hovered over a name, clicked an override dropdown, and flagged the employee for offboarding without their knowledge. I sat frozen, watching it again and again. Jenna was risking everything. I typed back. Why are you doing this? Her reply was instant. Because I'm next, and because you were the only one who ever looked me in the eye when I spoke. That hit me harder than I expected. Jenna was barely 30 when she joined. Quiet, precise, always prepared. I'd taken her under my wing, guided her through her first couple of performance reviews. I remembered telling her, compliance isn't just rules, it's about people. Never forget that. She hadn't forgotten, but even as hope flickered, I knew we had to be careful. Jenna's name could never come up. Not with Olivia, not in depositions, not even whispered. I encrypted the files, renamed them, and sent a sanitized version to Olivia with no metadata. Anonymous internal source. I told her, no contact. No trail. She didn't press. She just said, this is gold. That night, I stared out the window as traffic lights blinked across the street. I should have felt victorious. We had a clear link tying the manipulation to the wider risk system, enough to put someone on the stand if we played it right. But instead, I felt responsible. Jenna was still there, waking under those same fluorescent lights where I'd collapsed. Now she was tied to me. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. But for the first time in ages, I had more than proof. I had someone who believed me. In that fragile moment between fear and courage, something grew. Trust quiet, cautious, but alive. When Olivia called again, the early October sun was slanting low, casting gold light before dusk. I sat at my desk in a sweatshirt, cold tea beside my laptop. Jenna's files half highlighted before me. I expected little. Maybe a check-in, a timeline update, some strategy talk. But Olivia's face appeared with something new. Sharp focus, intense at the edges. "I found something," she said, without preamble. I sat up straight. "What kind of something?" She held up a document to the camera, a scanned copy of a public filing. Amor's 2022 corporate restructuring documents. Pulled them from the Department of Labor archives, she explained. "Let me guess," I said. "Something they forgot to include?" Her smile was tight, controlled. Exactly, they never renewed their employee protections addendum after the merger. I blinked. "Wait, that's required to comply with Title I of the ADA and the new EEOC remote health guidelines, right?" "Exactly," she said, "and it gets better. Without that renewal, every denied medical leave or health-related offboarding is legally vulnerable. That includes you, but not just you." She sent another file. It loaded slowly on my aging laptop, but when it appeared, my breath caught a list. Names, titles, all familiar. Angela, Samuel, Cynthia, even Gerald Watts, the man who collapsed in the parking garage. 17 names, total 17 former employees quietly pushed out or transitioned after flagged medical incidents. Olivia had built a working database overnight. That's when it clicked. "This isn't just wrongful termination," I said. She nodded. "It's class action." For a long moment, we said nothing, but an unspoken understanding passed between us. The weight, the risk, and the rare chance to expose a system that didn't just forget people. It engineered their disappearance. My heart sped, not with panic, but with focused adrenaline and precision. For the first time in months, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. "So, what's next?" I asked. Olivia replied calmly. "We verify every name, build timelines, gather testimonials. Once we have 5 corroborated cases with matching patterns, we file. That gives us subpoena power. And if Preston Lang hides behind internal policies..." I finished for her. "We prove he knowingly ignored federal compliance." That was the knockout. He couldn't hide behind legal shields. If he consciously failed to renew protections, he'd be exposed as reckless and negligent. To employees, regulators, investors, and the public. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, exhaling slowly. Not triumphant, not relieved. Steady. A quiet kind of power. The kind that waits, not shouts. This wasn't some emotional revenge. It was strategy. Structured, methodical, like the audits I used to run. Only now, they were the ones under scrutiny. The irony was delicious. I reopened the shared folder and started tagging every employee I remembered working with. Notes, timelines, departure dates, rumors, replacements. My fingers moved instinctively. I knew this company inside and out. I had built its compliance framework. And now, that very framework they thought would bury me was about to become my weapon. Outside my apartment window, traffic hummed along unaware, but within the small rectangle of light on my screen, something far bigger was unfolding. Not rage or grief, something much more dangerous. A woman armed with proof and a plan. The envelope arrived at precisely 11:15 a.m., thick, cream-colored, sealed with a subtle gold embossed A. Olivia had warned me they might act soon, but what surprised me was how quietly it came. No warnings, no calls, just a packet, as if my erasure could be wrapped in paper. And FedExed away, I opened it carefully. Inside was a neatly typed letter from Avamor's legal team and a 14-page settlement agreement. The headline was clear. Settlement proposal, $300,000 in exchange for the terms enclosed. The undersigned party, Rachel Simmons, agreed to immediate, unconditional withdrawal of all legal action, destruction of all documentation obtained during or after employment, non-disclosure of all conversations, findings, and materials now and in the future. and a public statement confirming amicable resolution. My hands chilled as I flipped to the back page, where a signature line awaited. No apology, no admission of guilt, just money for silence, a check written in exchange for my dignity. I let the papers fall flat on the table. An hour later, Olivia joined me on a video call. She wasn't surprised. Classic move, she said. The silence before the voice gets too loud. It's insulting, I replied. They think this is about money. Olivia raised an eyebrow. Is it? No, I said sharply. It never was. I stood and paced the living room, the same room where I had recovered, broken and ignored, while HR sent notices timed perfectly to my collapse. I thought of Cynthia, Gerald, Samuel. I thought of Jenna, still working under those fluorescent lights, probably checking her shoulder every time a manager passed. I thought of my trembling hands in that hospital bed while the world moved on. And I thought of what signing that paper would mean. Taking their money, disappearing like they wanted, becoming just another redacted file, another erased risk. The thought made my skin crawl. I turned back to Olivia. I want them in court. She nodded slowly, and we moved forward. But I wasn't done. I grabbed a pen, flipped to the last page of the settlement offer, and wrote 4 words in bold black ink across the signature line. See you in court. Then I resealed the envelope that evening. I sent Jenna an encrypted message. They made me an offer. I said, no. We move. Her reply came within minutes. Good. They're nervous, started deleting internal logs. I'll send what I pulled before they wiped it. My chest tightened, not with panic, but resolve. The house of cards was shaking, and we had barely lifted the first layer. Later that night, I opened a clean document on my laptop and began typing. A summary, a ledger, a record of what they'd done, not just to me, but to the 17 others. Each name, each date, each tactic. I wasn't sure where I'd publish it yet, but I would. Maybe as evidence, maybe the first chapter of testimony, maybe just truth finally laid bare. What mattered was this. I wasn't taking their money, I wasn't taking their silence, and I sure as hell wasn't taking their amicable resolution. They wanted me quiet. I would give them the opposite, because sometimes the most powerful word isn't shouted or screamed or even spoken. It's written clearly, firmly, on the line where they thought they bought your silence. See you in court. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Fluorescent lights, pale gray carpet, that sterile scent of too much air conditioning and too little oxygen. I sat at the plaintiff's table, Olivia beside me, a thick folder of exhibits between us. My hands rested in my lap, fingers entwined to hide their trembling, not from fear anymore, but from everything I'd held inside too long. Across the room sat Preston Lang. He looked exactly as I remembered. Charcoal suit, expensive watch, hair perfectly styled. He leaned back, one leg crossed over the other, that familiar half-smirk tugging at his mouth's corners, the same I'd seen on Zoom calls, board meetings, investor presentations, as if this wasn't a trial, just another quarterly review. He didn't glance my way, but I saw him, I saw everything. How he whispered to his lawyer, how he brought no papers because men like him don't prepare. They expect the room to bend around them. I didn't move or flinch, but inside, something burned. Not the raw, shaking anger I once had, but a colder, sharper rage refined into precision. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge entered. Opening remarks were brief. Formalities. Both sides agreed on basic facts. My employment history, the date of my stroke, the termination notice, the lack of medical accommodation. Then Olivia stood. She moved with purpose, calm, composed, every word measured. This case is about more than one employee. It's about a system, a culture designed to squeeze everything from its people, then discard them when inconvenient. She paused, turning slightly to the jury. And we will show you, in their own words, with their own data, how that system was built. Preston didn't react, still leaning back, still grinning. Then it was our turn to present evidence. Olivia handed me the clicker. We agreed I would share my story, my voice, my experience, my body. They needed to hear it from me. I rose slowly, walked to the screen, and took a breath that filled my ribs. Click. The first slide appeared. A scanned image of my hospital intake report from the day of the stroke. Click a dated Slack message from an HR manager. Rachel Simmons is out. Can we initiate her exit protocol? Time-stamped 14 minutes after I collapsed. Click. Then I pulled out the final image, not on the screen, but printed, glossy, real. My brain scan from that night, I walked it to the jury box and held it up. The room fell silent. "This is my brain," I said, locking eyes with Preston. 47 minutes after I collapsed at my desk after a 14-hour day, after telling the CEO my team needed a break. He met my gaze briefly. I lifted the scan higher. "Is this what made me disposable?" I asked the jury. "Is this what turned me into a liability?" Not a single juror blinked. I returned to my seat, hands steady, though my heart pounded loudly, yet contained. Olivia gave me a subtle, reassuring nod beside me. Preston looked ahead again, but the smirk was gone. For the first time, he picked up a pen and began scribbling notes on a legal pad. I noticed that too. That night, alone in my dim apartment, phone silent, adrenaline faded, but resolve intact, I reflected on what I'd done. I had stood before strangers and held up undeniable proof of what they did to me, not as theory, not as metaphor, but as scans, blood work, and timestamps no one could erase. They had reduced me to a number today. I gave that number a voice, and tomorrow I'd seek a verdict. The trial's second day felt different. The courtroom remained cold and clinical, but the atmosphere had shifted. Maybe it was Preston tapping his pen more often, or his legal team clustering more tightly than before. His posture had changed, just slightly. Less relaxed. Less sure. I noticed I knew why. Today was Olivia's moment. Calm and composed, she began speaking with quiet authority. No theatrics, no raised voice, just a presence that commanded attention effortlessly. "Your Honor, today we present 2 pieces of evidence," she started. One from a current employee, one from a former employee's family. Together, they reveal a deliberate disregard for employee health at the executive level. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Olivia continued without faltering. Exhibit 43, a screen recording from Avamore's internal HR dashboard, captured before data deletion protocols, provided anonymously. It shows administrative overrides of time-off requests and quiet activation of offboarding linked to medical status. She pressed a key, and the screen displayed Jenna's file names and metadata were blurred to protect her, but the footage was clear. The mouse clicked tabs, adjusted a field labeled Override Absence Protocol, and selected a drop-down for Transition Health flag. Several jurors leaned forward. "Exhibit 44, Olivia said, is a confidential risk assessment report recovered from a flash drive preserved by a former employee. It lists 47 staff members ranked by insurance burden, with notes like evaluate for Q4 exit and minimize exposure before incident becomes visible." I shivered, though I'd read that line many times before. Olivia addressed the jury directly. "This is not negligence. This is architecture, a system designed to break people just before they become too expensive." Across the room, Preston finally looked up. His jaw tensed, pen stopped tapping. The judge asked, "Does the defense wish to respond?" Preston's lead counsel rose, but offered no objection. Instead, he requested a 15-minute recess granted. In the hallway, Olivia leaned close. "We just turned the knife," she whispered. "Now it's time to twist." I looked puzzled. She opened her binder, flipped to a legal brief, and pointed. "He never renewed his personal liability insurance, not since 2021. "But Amcor has blanket coverage," I said. "Yes," she replied, "but that excludes executive decisions made knowingly with risk and disregard for federal compliance." It took a moment to sink in. "You mean?" She nodded. "If the jury finds personal fault, Preston pays not the company, not shareholders, him." I felt the air leave my lungs slowly. Not shock, not triumph, something deeper. When court resumed, Olivia laid out the case clearly. Expired policy, intentional ADA non-compliance, digital proof, chain of command, recurring patterns. Preston stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. A muscle twitched at his temple. Did anyone else notice? That night, alone with dim lights, laptop open, I had Preston's insurance filing on one side and the employee health risk matrix on the other. A stillness settled over me. No joy, no revenge, just a heavy, deserved calm that didn't make me smile, but let me breathe again. Yet pain lingered. No ruling could undo the stroke. No verdict could return lonely nights in a hospital bed, wondering if I'd walk again. No fine erased the sting of a badge that wouldn't scan, of silence replacing recognition. But this was justice, imperfect, hard-fought, real. They tried to price me out of my worth. Now he'd pay every cent they thought I lacked. The verdict came on a crisp Tuesday morning, autumn light sharp and clear. The courtroom fell silent as the 4-person jury read the decision. Guilty of wrongful termination, guilty of health-based discrimination, guilty of deliberate federal compliance neglect. Preston Lang sat frozen as damages were confirmed. $74 million, payable personally, not by Avamore. No cheers, no outbursts. It wasn't a movie ending, it was quiet, like a door finally clicking mercifully shut behind you. That same afternoon, Amcor stock fell sharply within a week. 3 board members resigned. HR leadership faced investigations. The firm issued a public statement filled with buzzwords: culture renewal, employee-first restructuring, deep regret. But no one was listening anymore. Not me. 2 months later, I filed paperwork to start a nonprofit. The Rachel Clause, a fund and promise for workers like me, cast aside when inconvenient. We began small. 1 pro bono attorney, 1 crisis counselor, and a folder of names collected during discovery. The first week, 12 calls. The second, 52. By month's end, applications poured in from 6 states. I never spoke at Preston's asset hearing. I didn't have to watching his lakefront mansion and downtown penthouse auctioned while his legal team scrambled was enough. He lost more than money. He lost the illusion that people like him are untouchable. Yet, with every victory, something remained. Mornings were hardest. I'd wake early, instinctively reach for my laptop as before, but the rhythm had changed. Slower. My left hand still trembled, lifting a full coffee mug on rainy days. Stiffness returned to my shoulder. The fatigue wasn't just muscle deep, it lived in my bones. Justice, yes, but some wounds never fully heal. They're only remembered by name. One morning, Olivia called to tell me the final settlements had gone through. Every person on that original list had received compensation. Jenna, now safely away from Avamore, had begun writing a book. Angela, with her son off to college, had landed a job at a firm that actually offered benefits and respected boundaries. I hope it's enough, Olivia said. It's never enough, I replied quietly, but it's a start. I keep my brain scan tucked away in a drawer, not framed, not displayed, but I know it's there. A reminder, not of weakness, but of what it costs to survive a system built to erase you. And sometimes, when the nights are especially still, I catch myself whispering a simple truth, one that doesn't make headlines, but lives deep in my bones. I got justice, but every morning my left hand still trembles. No verdict ever gives you back lost time.